The first snow of December drifted past the cracked windows of Jefferson High, each flake dissolving against the glass before it could settle. Inside room 203, the heater rattled like a tired breath. Mr. Elijah Brooks, 57, stood before a blackboard that had seen more names than it had chalk dust left. He had been teaching English for 33 years. He knew every creak of the wooden floor, every hum of the flickering lights, and every kind of student who had passed through his door. The dreamers, the fighters, the ones who came hungry and left hopeful. But this year felt different. His breath came shorter. His hands sometimes trembled when he wrote on the board. The doctors had called it stage 4. He didn't tell anyone. Not yet. "All right, class," he said, his voice softer than usual. "We're finishing the color purple today." Celie said, "I'm poor, I'm black, I may even be ugly, but dear God, I'm here." "That's survival. That's grace. That's you." A ripple of murmurs went through the room. Some kids rolled their eyes, but a few, like Amira Cole, sitting in the second row, leaned forward. 17, quiet and stubbornly bright. Her notebook margins were full of doodles and fragments of poetry. Mr. Brooks smiled at her. "Miss Cole, what do you think Celie meant?" Amira hesitated, then said that she's more than what the world sees. That just being alive means something. He nodded, warmth flickering behind his tired eyes. "Exactly. And that, class, is what I want you to remember. Being alive means something, even when the world tells you otherwise." When the bell rang, the students poured out, their laughter echoing down the hall. Mr. Brooks sank into his chair. The chalk trembled in his hand before he set it down. He stared at the old class photo on his desk, a younger version of himself, surrounded by kids who were now adults, some of whom still sent Christmas cards. That afternoon, the principal, Ms. Davenport, stopped by. "You sure you don't want to take medical leave, Elijah? You look." "Fine," he cut in, forcing a smile. "Room 203 needs me." She sighed. "You've given this school everything." He looked at the window at the faint swirl of snow. Maybe it's time to give them something that lasts. That night he sat at his kitchen table, lit only by a single lamp. The house was silent except for the distant hum of Detroit traffic. He took out a box of stationery, cream-colored, elegant, the kind he used for special occasions. He began to write, "Dear student of room 203, if you are reading this, it means time has taken me where teaching could not. I've always believed words outlive the body. So I'm leaving mine here, one letter for each of you. You don't owe me your greatness. You owe yourself the truth of who you can be. Don't wait for the world to hand you a stage. Build your own. Mr. Brooks." He placed the letter in an envelope labeled Amira. He kept writing until dawn. By January, the rumors had started. Mr. Brooks had missed 2 days in a row. The substitute, a young man with too much confidence and too little patience, told the class, "He's probably just tired. You kids wore him out." Amira didn't laugh. She felt a knot in her stomach. After school, she walked past the teacher's parking lot and saw his old beige Buick still there, covered in frost. She waited, unsure why. Then the door opened and he appeared, thinner, his skin pale. "Amira," he said, surprised, "you should be home." "I wanted to ask about my essay," she lied. "I didn't get to finish the last paragraph." He smiled faintly. "Bring it tomorrow. We'll talk about it together." But tomorrow didn't come. He collapsed at home that night. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and distance. When he woke, tubes ran from his arms. Machines whispered beside his bed. He reached for the small bag he'd brought. Inside were 30 envelopes, each labeled with a student's name. The nurse, a woman named Grace, found him writing again at dawn. "Sir, you should rest." "I'm working," he said, smiling weakly. "Last lesson plans." She looked at the envelopes, curious. "You must be a teacher." "I was," he said. "Still am. Until the bell rings." 2 weeks later, Ms. Davenport called the students to the library. "Mr. Brooks won't be returning this semester," she announced, her voice trembling slightly. "He's unwell, but he left something for each of you." The room went silent as she handed out envelopes. Some students opened them immediately. Others tucked them away, embarrassed. Amira's hands shook as she tore hers open. "Dear Amira, you have a mind that sees poetry in sidewalks. Don't hide that. Don't trade your pen for silence. The world will try to make you small. Speak anyway. Remember, the bell doesn't end your story. It just signals the next chapter. Mr. Brooks." She pressed the letter to her chest, tears stinging her eyes. That night, she read it again and again until the words blurred. Something inside her, something she hadn't realized was caged, began to stir. In the weeks that followed, room 203 felt different. Students whispered about the letters. Some laughed at them. Others pinned them to their lockers. But for Amira, it became more than paper. It became permission. She began writing short poems and taping them on classroom doors. She wrote about cracked sidewalks and snow that didn't stay, about her mother working late shifts, about teachers who saw you even when you thought you were invisible. One morning, Ms. Davenport called her into the office. Amira braced for trouble. Instead, the principal smiled. "I've been reading your poems. Mr. Brooks would be proud." Amira blinked, startled. "You read them?" "They're on every door in the hall," Ms. Davenport said. Hard not to. When Amira left the office, she noticed something she hadn't before. Students were stopping to read her words. Some smiled, others nodded quietly. That night, she wrote another one, her best yet. "Room 203 is still breathing, even when the bell is gone. His voice is the chalk that lingers on the board of everyone." She taped it to the old classroom door, and for the first time since he left, she swore she heard his voice, faint but certain, echoing through the empty halls. Being alive means something. The snow melted into dirty slush along Jefferson Avenue, revealing the cracks in the sidewalks and the rusted chain-link fences behind the school. Winter was still clinging to Detroit, but spring was trying its best to be heard. By February, room 203 was officially under maintenance. The chalkboard had been wiped clean, the chairs stacked in the corner, and the ghost of Mr. Brooks hung in the air like the faint smell of chalk and cologne. Students passed by the door more quietly now, as if noise might disturb something sacred. Amira came every afternoon after class, even though the room was locked. She would sit across the hall, notebook in her lap, writing poems she never showed anyone. Her mother called them daydream scribbles. "You can't live on words, baby," her mother had said one night, exhausted from her hospital shift. "The world doesn't feed poets." Amira had just nodded, hiding her notebook beneath her pillow. One Monday morning, Ms. Davenport stopped her in the hallway. "Amira, can you come by my office at lunch?" Amira's first thought was, what did I do? When she arrived, the principal's office smelled of lemon polish and faint perfume. On the desk sat a small, worn box, the same kind Mr. Brooks used to carry his papers in. Ms. Davenport folded her hands. His sister, Lorraine, dropped this off. She said it belonged to him, and that one of the letters was never delivered. It has no name. She slid the box forward. Amira hesitated, heart thudding. "Why give it to me?" "Because you seem to understand him," Ms. Davenport said softly. "Maybe you'll know what to do with it." Inside the box were more envelopes, each neatly sealed in the same careful handwriting. On top of them was a faded Polaroid, Mr. Brooks standing beside a teenage boy, smiling outside the school steps. Amira picked up the unnamed letter. The envelope was blank except for the words, "For who needs it most." Her fingers trembled. Should I open it? Ms. Davenport smiled sadly. "I think he'd want you to." She didn't open it right away. For days, she carried it everywhere, tucked into her coat pocket, her bag, her journal. She'd take it out sometimes during lunch, staring at the handwriting, afraid that reading it would make it real, final. One rainy afternoon, she finally unfolded it in the library. Dear student, if this found you, it means you're at a crossroads between who you've been told you are and who you can still become. I have seen too many young people bury themselves before the world even knows their names. Don't let the silence win. You will fail. You will hurt. But the purpose of pain is to make you remember that you're alive and still have something to give. E. Brooks. Amira read it 3 times. Then she pressed it against her chest, as if she could feel his heartbeat through the paper. That night, she wrote until 3 a.m. The poem that came out was nothing like her others. It was raw, full of questions and grief and gratitude. He wrote us from a place beyond pain, where chalk turned into prayer. He said, "You will fail, but don't stop breathing." And I didn't. She titled it The Unopened Envelope. A week later, the school hosted its annual community open night, a tradition Mr. Brooks had always loved. Parents came for talent shows and exhibitions, though attendance had dwindled in recent years. This time, Ms. Davenport added something new, a tribute to room 203. Amira's English teacher asked if she'd read one of her poems on stage. Her first instinct was no. Her voice shook even during attendance. But that night, she remembered his line, "You don't owe me your greatness. You owe yourself the truth." So she said yes. The auditorium smelled of popcorn and cleaning supplies. The crowd was thin, teachers, a few parents, and scattered students. Ms. Davenport welcomed everyone with a speech about legacy and community, then nodded toward Amira. She stepped up to the microphone, her notebook trembling in her hands. The light felt too bright. Her heartbeat filled her ears. She looked up and saw in the back row Lorraine Brooks, Elijah's sister, sitting with a handkerchief, smiling through her tears. That gave her courage. Her voice started small, but grew steadier. "This is for the teacher who saw us, even when we couldn't see ourselves. For the man who turned words into windows and let the light in." The room grew still. She read the rest, all 24 lines, and when she finished, there was silence for a breath that felt like eternity. Then came applause, real, heartfelt applause. Lorraine stood first, clapping with both hands, eyes wet. After the event, Lorraine approached her. "You must be Amira." "Yes, ma'am." "He mentioned you," Lorraine said softly. "Said you had a poet's soul. I wanted to thank you for keeping him alive in that room." Amira didn't know what to say. She simply handed her the unnamed letter. "He wrote this. It didn't have a name. Maybe it was meant for you." Lorraine took it, handshaking. She unfolded it slowly, reading the words. When she finished, she pressed the paper to her lips. "He wrote this after our mama died," she whispered. "I recognize his phrasing. He must have rewritten it for his students." She looked at Amira with wet eyes. "He always said teaching wasn't a job. It was planting trees you might never sit under." Amira felt her throat tighten. He planted a forest. Spring arrived slowly that year. Room 203 reopened, freshly painted, but still the same at heart. The new teacher, Mr. Fields, was young and eager, all energy and ambition. He didn't understand why some students kept glancing at the corner desk, the one where Mr. Brooks had always sat. One morning, Amira and a few classmates placed something on that desk, a framed poem titled "For Who Needs It Most." Below it, a photo of Elijah Brooks, smiling in front of the school. Mr. Fields asked, "Who is he?" A student named Jamal answered, "He's the reason some of us are still here." The teacher fell silent. At home, Amira began applying to colleges. Her guidance counselor had encouraged her to submit one of her poems for a scholarship essay. She used the one she read that night, The Unopened Envelope. Weeks passed, and then the letter came. A white envelope with the seal of Wayne State University. She tore it open and gasped. She had won a full scholarship for creative writing. She ran to her mother, who stared at the letter for a long moment before pulling her into a fierce embrace. "He saw it in you before I did," her mother whispered. That Sunday, Amira and Lorraine visited the cemetery. The sky was a pale gray, the wind cool and quiet. The tombstone read, Elijah Brooks, 1967 to 2024. Teacher, believer, builder of dreams. They placed a bouquet of wildflowers at the base, the kind that grew through cracks, stubborn and bright. Amira knelt and whispered, "You said the bell doesn't end our story. You were right." Lorraine smiled through tears. "He'd be so proud." Amira opened her notebook and read aloud her newest poem, the first one written not in grief but in gratitude. "Your lessons are seeds under winter ground, quiet, waiting for spring. We carry them in our hearts, Mr. Brooks, and the world will hear them sing." The wind stirred the pages. It felt like a reply, and for a moment it seemed as though the faint sound of a school bell drifted through the air, not ending anything, but beginning something new. The city of Detroit moved like an old soul trying to find rhythm again. Factories reopened, buses still groaned down Grand River Avenue, and spring sunlight warmed the cracked murals of children reading. Murals that Mr. Brooks himself once helped paint. Amira Cole was now 18, standing on the steps of Jefferson High for the last time. Graduation day. Her gown shimmered in deep blue, her cap set crooked over her curls. Around her, students laughed, families cheered, phones clicked. Yet her gaze lingered on room 203, the windows glinting like quiet eyes watching over them. In her hand was a folded speech. She'd been chosen as valedictorian. When the ceremony began, the gym echoed with the restless murmur of youth and nostalgia. The principal spoke first, then the district superintendent. Finally, Ms. Davenport took the podium, her voice trembling slightly. "This year's graduating class carries a legacy of resilience," she said. "And one teacher, though no longer with us, left behind a gift that still speaks. Our valedictorian, Miss Amira Cole, has chosen to honor that voice today." Amira stepped forward to the microphone. Her hands trembled, but her voice, clear, warm, and full, carried through the air. "3 years ago, I walked into room 203 thinking English was just grammar and red ink. But there was a teacher who believed words could build homes, heal hearts, and open doors. When he got sick, he left us letters, 30 of them. Each one said something different, but they all said the same thing. Being alive means something." She paused, scanning the crowd, faces blurred behind tears. "We live in a city that's been called broken, but maybe we're just rebuilding. And every brick we lay, every poem we write, every kindness we give, that's how we keep his voice alive. So, to Mr. Elijah Brooks, the bell hasn't ended your story. It just rang for ours." The audience rose in applause, slow and thunderous. Lorraine Brooks, sitting in the front row, wept openly. After graduation, local reporters showed up, curious about the teacher who left letters. Ms. Davenport gave them permission to reprint a few excerpts. Within a week, the Detroit Free Press ran an article titled "Lessons from Room 203, the Teacher Who Wrote His Way into Immortality." It went viral. Former students began sharing their own letters online. Snapshots, memories, paragraphs that had changed their lives. Hashtags like #letters from 203 and #being alive means something started trending locally. A woman who had graduated 15 years earlier posted, "He told me to keep painting even when no one buys your art. I did, and now my work hangs in the library." A man in his 30s wrote, "He said to forgive my father. I did. We talk every week now." Suddenly, Elijah Brooks wasn't just a name on a stone. He was a movement. One Saturday in August, the city organized a memorial reading at the Detroit Public Library downtown. The auditorium overflowed, teachers, students, parents, even people who had never met him. On the stage stood a wooden podium the same one from Jefferson High, with a simple sign, letters still being read. Amira was the closing reader. She looked around at the crowd and saw faces of every age, a tapestry of those touched by a man who had written to be remembered, not for fame, but for faith in others. She opened a worn notebook, the edges yellowed. This, she said, was the letter he never sent, the one that changed me. She read, "You will fail, you will hurt, but the purpose of pain is to make you remember you're alive." Then she looked up. He wasn't just talking to me. He was talking to all of us. The room was silent. Even the air seemed to pause. And then, from somewhere in the back, someone whispered, "Amen." It spread, soft murmurs, nods, tears. Amira smiled through hers. He taught English, but really he taught how to live. The applause lasted long after she stepped away from the microphone. Months passed. Amira began her first semester at Wayne State University. Her dorm was small, her days long, but she carried his words everywhere, written on sticky notes, folded in her wallet, tattooed into her memory. She joined the campus poetry club. Her first performance night was nerve-wracking, but when she stood under the dim cafe lights, she thought of room 203. "My teacher told me," she said, "that failure is a comma, not a period." The crowd laughed softly. She smiled. So this poem is for every person who's still writing their sentence. When she finished, the applause felt like the ringing of a bell. Meanwhile, Ms. Davenport and Lorraine worked together to create the Elijah Brooks Foundation, a scholarship fund for Detroit students pursuing writing or education. The first recipient, Amira Cole. At the award ceremony, held in the newly renamed Brooks Learning Center, Lorraine spoke. Elijah once said that teachers are like candles, they burn themselves to give others light. But I think he'd be proud to know that his flame started 1,000 more. She turned to Amira. "You're one of them." Amira hugged her, tears spilling freely. "Thank you for sharing him with us." Lorraine whispered back, "Thank you for making sure he's never forgotten." That night, after the ceremony, Amira walked home through downtown Detroit. The city lights reflected in puddles, left by afternoon rain. The skyline shimmered like memory. She passed the old school, Jefferson High, its windows glowing faintly. She stopped and looked at room 203. Through the glass, she could see the new class, students hunched over desks, a young teacher at the board. She smiled, whispering to herself, the room's still breathing. From her bag, she pulled out one last envelope, the very first one he'd written, the one addressed to her name. The paper was worn from being read so many times, but she unfolded it again. "You have a mind that sees poetry in sidewalks. Don't hide that." She placed it gently under a loose brick near the school steps, a secret time capsule. "For who needs it next?" she murmured. Then she walked away into the night, Detroit humming around her, buses sighing, lights flickering, life moving forward. 1 year later, at Jefferson High, a freshman named Jalen Porter found the envelope while waiting for his ride home. He opened it, curious, and read the letter. He didn't know who Mr. Brooks was. He didn't know why someone had left it there. But something in those words, "being alive means something," struck him deeply. That week, Jalen signed up for the poetry club. When he showed his first poem to Ms. Davenport, she smiled knowingly. "Looks like room 203 has a new story to tell." The final bell of the day rang across the halls, echoing down empty corridors and sunlit rooms. It sounded, for all who listened, not like an ending, but like a promise continuing. Thanks for watching.